Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Carrie. I'm your host, Carrie Roldan. I'm a wife, a mother, a runner, a best-selling author, a personal growth junkie, and your total business BFF. And I am so excited today to be, I'm excited for every episode of the show to be talking with people who are well-known in their niche, in their industry. Maybe they're known for one thing. Talking to them about other things, something else entirely, because what I know is that how you do anything is how you do everything. And it can be so refreshing to find out more about the people who are known for something, find out more about how they do everything. So I'm excited to be here today with my friend Kristin Kaufman. Kristin, hello, welcome. Thanks for being here.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
So where in the world are you joining me from? Because I know recently you were in Arkansas. Are you?
Right. I'm in Dallas, Texas, which is where Lulu, my little doggie, and I stay. This is our home, but I've been in Hot Springs, Arkansas a lot over the last couple of years.
And I just saw, was it Hot Springs, Arkansas? I saw something on Facebook that you were serving on a board there.
Well, in Fayetteville, Arkansas. So the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, which is where I got my undergraduate degree, I sit on that board of directors.
How awesome. The things that you find out about people just by looking at their Facebook.
Isn't that wild? I know. Go Hogs. And I have on my Razorback red, so it's all good.
I see that. I have a very good friend from college who ran there in the late 90s, which they're still a good team, but they were a great team back then. And so, yes, she's always, what did they say? The suey, right?
Yeah, Woo Pig Suey.
Yeah, there you go. She's
awesome. Good.
Yeah. So I kind of don't even know where to start with you. What I want to talk about with you is let's start with, you're currently an entrepreneur, but you left corporate.
I did.
And what was that process like? I think a lot of people who watch are either they have this desire to follow their big dream, but they feel afraid to leave the safety of corporate, or they're in that boat where they've been kicked out of corporate, or they're leaving corporate voluntarily, and now they're just like sort of swimming in the world of entrepreneurialism, trying to figure things out. So, can you walk me through your process of leaving corporate?
Absolutely. So there were I left twice.
Okay.
The first time I left, I was in the technology space, and I was leaving a software company, and I was sick. I actually had been very ill and needed to take time off to go through treatment and to get well. And lo and behold, I was given this marvelous opportunity to work in New York City under Mayor Bloomberg doing education reform work. And so that was my first stint of leaving corporate America. It was probably the catalyst that launched me into entrepreneurship, but I did not launch into entrepreneurship right away, because after my 3-year stint working in New York, it became very apparent, which many of your listeners may relate to, I needed health insurance. Mm-hmm. And this was long before Obamacare, so I was not insurable. So when, lo and behold, the very company that wouldn't give me insurance, as divine providence would have it, calls me and wants me to join as a vice president, I took the job and never looked back. Knew that it was a bad mistake. Honestly, Carrie, it wasn't, I don't believe in mistakes, but it was definitely an epiphany for me 2 weeks into that job that I knew it was not going to be a good cultural fit for me. So I powered through for 2 full years, and then woke up one morning, I'll never forget it, in the Sofitel Hotel in Minnetonka. And I woke up, I know, that's a place. And I woke up and said, you know what, this is not for me, and I'm leaving. And I did what all good daddies tell their good daughters not to do, and I left a job without having another. I never looked back, and I had a peace that passed all understanding. And I used that scripture deliberately because I didn't really know what I was going to do. I didn't know where this was going to lead, but I knew that wasn't it. So I left, and it was just a very liberating experience. But I had a peace that passed all understanding, and it did carry me through until I determined how I wanted to manifest, going forward.
So what kind of work were you in the corporate world? What did you do?
Right. Well, so I started off with Hewlett-Packard Company, in technology back in 1983. So I will let your viewers know I'm 58 years old. So I'm probably I'm the old codger here. And I grew up in that wonderful gold standard of the HP way culture. And when I left, I was running a very large business unit for them. It was about a $3 billion selling to, through, and with business unit for them. And then I went into software doing the same exact thing, building out a distribution channel for a software company. So my business was leading large teams of people with a P&L responsibility, very, very sales oriented, but certainly not solely sales oriented, right? We had a multifaceted, obligation or commitment to the company on all three companies that I worked for.
Okay. So I kind of know, it's so interesting. So my background is I think I have zero corporate experience in, like, when I think of a large company like Hewlett-Packard, or my husband works for a big engineering firm with like thousands of employees. After I graduated college, I worked for a company, but they were very small, local, like family run. They've since become really big, but I wouldn't like call that as part of the corporate world. And then I became a teacher, right? Which is definitely not corporate. And then I did coaching, and then I became an entrepreneur. So forgive me for not completely understanding the whole corporate culture.
That's okay. Probably good.
Well, it's interesting just because I come across so many people who are healing from that. So what I want to know is, in that job, that it sounds like the third job that you took, where after you had your 3 years doing the educational reform work, you took another job and you said you knew within 2 weeks that it wasn't for you,
Absolutely.
Right? But you stayed because, I'm guessing, security, health insurance.
I needed health insurance.
Okay.
I mean, it was really Maslow's hierarchy. I really needed that low rung, because at that time, there was no such thing as Obamacare, where you had a safety net for insurance. And I had an illness that could have bankrupted me, if I needed to have gotten treatment and could not have afforded it. Now, we all know those stories. You can drop $1 million on chemotherapy and other treatments without even blinking an eye if you don't have insurance.
So, you left that job. When you left that job, had your illness cleared up by then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but you never know.
Okay. So you were in a space where you at least felt for that red hot minute you could survive. You were not.
Yeah, $59 a month health insurance as an executive with a healthcare company is a pretty nice perk, especially when you're used to paying. At that time, I was paying well over $1,500 a month for health insurance. Yeah. So, and I know some of your listeners will relate to that, because those of us who've gone through that channel, it's a reckoning. And thankfully, our world has shifted somewhat. We still have a healthcare crisis, in my opinion. But, you learn, as my daddy used to tell me, you learn how to navigate. And I used to say, Dad, I can't believe I'm going to have to pay $1,500 a month in health insurance. And his answer was, well, I guess you'll need to sell $1,500 more of something. Because that's how you have to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I was thinking? This is a little bit of a side note, but I was thinking about, I don't know why I was thinking about this, maybe for this conversation today. I was driving my daughter home from school yesterday, and I was thinking about the healthcare. I must have heard something, but healthcare in our country right now, and why people are so divided on it, and how other countries look at us and go, why don't they just take care of their own? And I was thinking about how, isn't it interesting? This is just a comment on human nature. Maybe you'll have some insight. Isn't it interesting how none of us, not none of us, but lots of us don't want to pay more in taxes. We definitely don't want to pay more. Like, I hear the argument all the time, I don't want to pay for somebody else, like somebody else not taking care of themselves, or all the stories around the others, right? Them. But when somebody's sick, how willing we are as a culture to donate to a stranger's Kickstarter, or not Kickstarter, what do they call those?
GoFundMe or
yeah,
funding
GoFundMe,
page.
they're asking for money. Like, we hear a story about some other human beings who's sick and doesn't have money for healthcare, and we donate in droves.
I know.
But we don't want to pay for better healthcare as a country. I find that so interesting.
Yeah, it's a travesty, and it has to be fixed. That problem is so multifaceted. I call it the Bermuda Triangle. You know, you've got the payers, the providers, and the patients, and it's all like, and then you add in pharmaceutical companies on top of that, and it's just one big cluster, you know?
So, that's 4 Ps you gave me.
I know. Well, it's a cluster, and anybody who's been in a situation like I've been in and I've had 3 experiences like that where I've had to look death in the face, and you have a complete shift of how you make meaning about that.
So how did you get to this place? 2 weeks in, you know, you didn't want to be there, but you still, 2 years later,
right,
are able to leave, make the decision, find the courage to leave, and have peace beyond measure.
You know, I think you know what you know when you know it. And I woke up one morning and I knew, number one, I wasn't honoring myself. I was not honoring why I believe I was put on this planet to start with. I was absolutely reared with the obligation. When you take on a responsibility, you see that responsibility through.
Yep.
So I had to kind of reckon with that. And ironically, you know, my parents, who are both gone now, I lost them this past year. It was amazing how they encouraged me to stay true to my inner voice and the whispers that I was hearing. And they actually were the ones that said, you know, you're going to make yourself sick again if you stay in an environment where it's going against your flow. And so they gave me a beautiful permission, not that I needed it at that age. I could have made the decision myself, but it's very liberating to have the 2 people that you respect the most in the world, who have reared you to believe responsibility, discipline, commitment, you know, et cetera, are paramount in the corporate arena. And they give you liberation to say, you know, I can still have responsibility, commitment, et cetera, and just do so in a different sandbox. So it was a very liberating thing. And I never looked back. And I think, so when people are in the spot, Carrie, where they're like, oh my gosh, I've got golden handcuffs on, but I don't really like it. It's a very sweet spot for me to help coach them through it, because there are multiple ways that you can contribute to the world. And the mothership is just one. There are lots of pods out there, you know, to use the metaphor, right?
Love that you call it the mothership. Love it.
It's the truth though, right? We it's like we're weaned on that.
Okay, so you just breezed through. You said I wasn't honoring myself, and I wrote living your purpose, but you said doing what I was put on this earth to do. So what is that?
Yeah. Well, I think it shifts, by the way. I don't think it's finite. Okay. I do believe our number one responsibility as a human being is to actualize our potential. Okay?
Amen.
And that happens in lots of different ways. I mean, I think you and I both use the word alignment a lot. I mean, that's the name of my company. And I believe alignment also shifts. I was totally 100% aligned, Carrie, when I was at Hewlett-Packard. I loved that role for 20-something years. So I was not out of alignment until I decided to leave, right? And then I went, okay, this suit doesn't fit anymore, metaphorically speaking. It's not to say that it didn't at one time. It just meant that I outgrew it, because we're constantly evolving as creatures, and we're constantly evolving as humans living a spiritual journey, right? And so we have to listen to what it is that we need to manifest in our next vocation, so to speak.
Okay, so talk to me about that word vocation, because when I was young, it meant your job, but I get the feeling that's not what it means.
Well, the job is a piece of it, right? I think alignment, you know, from my perspective, is when you love what you do, you're good at it, but most importantly, probably the single most important leg of that 3-legged stool is if it's tied to something much greater than yourself. And the minute that you don't have any one of those 3 things, you're out of alignment, right? Because if you don't love it, you're probably not going to be good at it for long, right? And if you're not good at it, meaning it's not in alignment with how your skills and your preferences, your desires, your talents, your gifts are all lined up, then you're probably not going to love it for long.
Yep.
And most importantly, if it's not tied to something bigger than what is present right there in front of you, then you're going to burn out. And you just are. I coach people all the time that they just get burned out, right? They may have been fabulous at it when they started in that job, and they've progressed and they've grown and they're making all this money. And then they kind of go, is this all there is, Alfie? You know, what's it all about, Alfie? And then they're burned out. And frankly, a lot of times they get laid off because they're no longer good at it, right? They lost the plot. Somewhere along the line, they lost the plot.
Oh my gosh, so good. Okay, so what is the three-legged stool? What were the three legs that you said?
So this is from just a job perspective, not necessarily if you're talking about life, because life is much bigger than that. This is a piece of it. If you love what you do, whatever that is, physician, attorney, coach, actress, whatever, you're good at it, meaning what you love and what your skills and gifts are, and really more importantly, is it tied to something greater than yourself? Is it tied to something more than the almighty dollar, the span of control, the title, whatever it is, the conventional thinkers of the world? I'm a post-conventional thinker, but I was conventional at one part in my adult development, of course, because you transcend and include all of those experiences, right? So when all of that, if any of those are out of alignment, you know it, by the way. You can be in denial for a little bit, but then something's going to break. Your body's going to break. Your mind's going to break. You're going to break. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I just love the way you say. I talk about something similar. I talk about living in your strengths, right? And understanding that a strength is not necessarily something that you're good at, right? Like a strength is something that while you're doing it, it's to love what you do. While you're doing it, it fills you up. There's something about that thing that enlivens you, that makes you feel fully alive. Yes. And if that is the case, you'll love what you do. And you may not be great at it now, but you can get good at it, right? Because it's aligned with your gifts and your talent. Like there may be stuff you need to learn.
Sure. Hopefully there will be. Otherwise you're going to get bored.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like the idea of something greater than yourself. And as you're talking about the evolution, because that greater than yourself thing might just be a tiny bit greater than yourself at first, right? And then you outgrow that, and then it's a little bit bigger than you, and then you outgrow that, and then it's a little until it becomes a movement or something massive.
Right.
Oh, I really love that. Okay, I have so many questions for you, but I want to shift gears a little bit. Actually, I want to talk about one thing because I'm really curious. So you were this I'm picturing you in your red suit with your shoulder pads in the 80s, like this high-powered. And that when you said I'm a post-conventional thinker, I think kind of, but you were like a high-power businesswoman in the 80s when the glass ceiling kind of started, right? Like although did you tell me that women's salaries were proportionately higher in the 80s than they are now? Was that you who told me that?
No. Mm-mm.
Someone did. But what was that experience like, just being like a highly successful woman back in the 80s when it was like, I was growing up and they were like, you can do anything. They were pointing to people like you going, see, she can do it.
Well, in the 80s, I was still kind of a neophyte in my professional development, to be honest. I mean, I had not reached that executive status at that point until it was probably the mid 90s that I ultimately got to where I thought I was to be, quote unquote. Yeah. And, I never felt the glass ceiling, to be perfectly honest with you. And part of that, as I mentioned earlier, the Hewlett-Packard culture, the HP way. I mean, I started when Bill and Dave were still active in the company, and boy, I'm really dating myself. And we had marvelous role models. We had a lot of women who, Carla Fiorina came in, as our CEO, and there are lots of mixed opinions about her tenure there, but there's no denying that she absolutely took the helm of at that time, one of the top 2 computer technology companies in the world. Right. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for her. I know her personally, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for just that accomplishment. So I never felt the glass ceiling, to be honest with you. I always felt encouraged. I always felt like I was even, to be perfectly honest. I never felt that, oh my gosh, that hashtag Me Too thing. I mean, yes, I did have a few bosses, which of course I've written about in this upcoming book about where they weren't good bosses.
Right.
They weren't. One of them gave me an IQ test. Imagine that. Yep. Uh-huh. That kind of thing, which of course now he'd be fired if he'd done that.
Sure.
Right. But back then, that was when all of this equal opportunity was really coming to fruition.
Yeah.
But I didn't know any different. Let's get real. I didn't know any different. I took that IQ test. I was mad about it, but I took it, and, there you go. Right.
So that was my wondering, is you never felt like you had to be better than the men you just felt you were in a really good culture, it sounds like.
Well, and I did feel like, and I felt like in order for me to be recognized, whether it be a man or a woman, I needed to be better.
Sure.
Right. So I never felt like it was a detriment because I was a female, ever. I'll tell you what I did feel. I was a young woman from Hot Springs, Arkansas, who graduated from the University of Arkansas. I didn't graduate from Harvard. I didn't graduate from Dartmouth. I didn't graduate from Stanford. I wasn't from Boston or San Francisco or Chicago. I was from a town of 35,000 people, and I graduated from the state university. So if I ever felt like there was oh my gosh, I've got to prove it to them, it was more on that as opposed to me just not having a penis.
Was there... Just not having a
Sorry,
penis.
I used that word. I hope that's okay.
It's totally okay. So was there a moment, when was it? I love the aha moments that come in our lives, right? So I'm guessing feeling that way, was it because others made you feel that way? Or was it because our culture tells us that Stanford's better, right? Harvard's better?
Yeah, well, I think if no one ever told me, but I think their insecurity, oftentimes, that need to promote what they believed was better, because that is the human condition, right? Then I would immediately go, wow, oh, okay, I guess I didn't graduate from one of those schools. And so, but I never, my mom and dad always used to say, don't allow them you empower them to let you feel that way. You are just as capable. You are just as talented, and you can do anything you want to do. It all comes down to how badly you want to do it. And so that whole thing that was, to answer your question, yes, there was a lot of that. I went to this school. I have an MBA from that school, right? I didn't. And so if I had allowed it to soak in, then Lord knows what would have happened. But, I had to pull myself up by my bootstraps, as my mama would say. And so, not that, paralyze me. It serves as a catalyst, not a paralyzer.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I love that. So was there a moment when you recognized, oh, I'm better, or I'm just as good? Was there a moment where you recognized like, oh, actually the qualifications are meaningless?
Yes. Honestly, I think it was pretty early in my career where, I was selling at that time. That's how I got started. And I was Rookie of the Year, because I was a hard worker.
Yep.
And I was lucky that I had a couple of really great mentors who, held the mirror up and, helped coach me and guide me. And then you realize pretty fast, especially as you called on people and you met other people in the business community, most of them didn't have masters from Harvard, right? Yeah. And yet they had achieved greatness on their level. And then, of course, that was one of the big epiphanies, that everybody runs their own race, right? Yeah. We may all start at different places, and where we go and how we get there will always be different. And that's the beauty of it, right? And so it was resisting the temptation to compare that, oh my gosh, I don't have an engineering degree from Rice, or I don't have an engineering degree from Stanford, and yet I can still run the same race. I will go about it differently, Carrie, you'll totally get this, but I mentioned I was from Hot Springs, and I'll never forget, and knowing, having this conversation, you probably picked up on, I'm a metaphor thinker and verbalizer anyway.
Yeah.
People used to call them Kristinisms because I would mix all sorts of metaphors. And I remember someone saying to me, you need to not speak with a Southern accent, and you need to ditch the metaphors because they're not professional and you're coming across X, Y, and Z. And of course, at the time, this was when women wore blue suits and red bow ties. Of course, and I never did that because my mother didn't want me to. She wanted me to dress feminine, so I did. I always looked professional, but the point is that I wasn't going to fit into a mold. Never did, never would. And yet I thought, oh my gosh, I'm speaking with a Southern accent and I'm talking with metaphors. Oh my gosh. And ironically, Carrie, fast forward now, almost 40 years later, that has become the trademark, right? Not because I intended it to be, but because I couldn't undo that flywheel. It was already, that horse was out of the barn. I couldn't go, whoa, I got to reframe. And so that I learned that just because I don't talk, act, dress, or went to the same school as a lot of these people doesn't mean that I couldn't have been just as successful and contribute in the way that was unique to my journey, right? And that was very affirming over the years.
Well, and I mean, now, of course, it's, okay, a Southern accent to me, someone from California, right, who speaks like the people on TV talk, I think that a Southern accent, it instantly endears me to that person. I tend to think that anybody who speaks with a Southern accent is warm and genuine. Like these are prejudices I have around a Southern accent, right? But Southern accent to me is like, oh, I can lean into this person, right? Like
everybody feels that way.
Well, isn't that interesting? So yeah. One time, the very first time I did the future self visualization, I saw my future self and she was a mix between like a Diane Sawyer type of a person and Paula Deen. And it was because of that, like, that's how I associate that Southern accent is like just hospitable and warm and inviting. And I'm so glad it worked out for you. And yes, ultimately, like we can't change the things that make us who we are, right? That make us unique. Like you lose the Southern accent, then you're just another suit. You lose that, right? Like you lose your feminine touches. You are that woman I was describing earlier that feels like she's got to be meaner and better and, harder than the men. She has to work twice as hard or whatever. You found a way to be you.
Yeah. Well, that's our most precious gift, right? Is to find out who we really are and to let that into the world.
I actually believe that's our purpose. So I think when we were talking about vocation, people so often, they're looking for what's my purpose, and especially in the industry that I'm in, what's my purpose and how do I monetize it, right? Which sometimes those things don't go together.
Conflict, yeah.
But people are looking, okay, what's my purpose? How do I make a big impact with it, right? They associate their purpose with, but what I recognize is your purpose is just to be the evolving you, right? Like that's what your purpose is. That's why you're here, is to experience, like you said something about
you actualize your potential.
Yes. Right. And that's not a job description, right? No. That's not a big mission in the world. You can have a big mission in the world. You can have an amazing job that is in alignment with, which is I think what you're talking about, is in alignment with your purpose. But like your real purpose is to be fully you. Okay, I got questions for you because I watched a video that you did a while ago. And we're not talking today about like the things that you're known for, but you have a very impressive resume. And I watched a video you did a while ago saying, this is why I have, I think how many streams of income were you saying that you talked about building wealth and that it's not about a high paying job and it's not about a successful business. It can be about all of these things, right? But that multiple channels of income.
Correct.
And I thought that might be a really fun thing for you and I to dive a little bit into, because I know about this in concept, like in books that I've read, but like full disclosure, I have 3, 4, 5 maybe, but several of them are in the same realm, streams of income. So can you just talk to me a little bit about that?
So you mean, okay, so I just believe that the days of having one job in one corporation, which probably most people are not embracing that as they once did, but back in the day, back in our grandparents' day, not so much in my parents' day, because they were the ones who kind of stimulated this thought process in me that you need to have more than one revenue stream. But it gives you diversification, just like in the stock market. You're not going to put all your eggs in one basket. So it gives you diversification. It gives you the ability to have recession-proof income. It gives you the ability to leverage. To your point, you're kind of all in the same realm. Well, that's a good thing, because you can augment and extend what your core is, right, into multiple ways of bringing income in. So I just believe that. I think it's a security, it's a diversification. It keeps your life interesting, quite frankly, because then you're not tied to just one way of 9 to 5. And you never know how the market's going to shift. You never know, how the market's going to shift. And so I think if you're just talking about the Maslow's hierarchy, which we're on the earth plane, so even though I'd love to just fly in the ether all day, you're on the earth plane, so you got to have a way to make money, right? You have to know that you've got to have that, and just to have one revenue stream is a pretty risky proposition, specifically in today's world.
Oh, I hear your dog calling. I hear your dog shaking.
Lulu, I know. I don't know where she's going, but it's okay. I'm right here, Lulu. I'll bring her over here in a minute if she...
It's so funny. The last guest that I interviewed, her dog was there the whole time too. After we recorded, she's like, he was so quiet. And then we turned the camera on and the dog was chewing his bone. I love it. I love all the dog sounds. Mine are outside because they bark. But, okay. So what does that look like for you though? So I'm assuming you had, some sort of retirement package when you left corporate. But I know you've done several things. You have a company. You've got...
and it's interesting. It wasn't really, to be in full transparency, it's not like I thought, okay, I've got to map this out. I mean, a lot of this just happened because of divine providence. Not that I'm suggesting that we all sit around and wait for manna to drop from heaven, but I think our job is to be open and receptive to opportunities that cross our path, because they're not crossing our path accidentally. Yeah. I just do not believe in accidents. I think incidental encounters are not incidental at all. And so when these things kind of either cross my mind or someone crossed my path that gave me, an idea, I really felt a sacred responsibility to investigate that idea or that opportunity. So I have my leadership consulting and coaching business. I have a keynote speaking business. I have my books. I've got a 3rd book coming out, which, by the way, note to self, you're not going to make gajillions of dollars off book royalties, okay? But it is a marketing tool. So, that's all good. My skincare business, which again was a little bit of a dog leg, but ironically has turned out to be a vehicle for me to offer to people who are seeking alignment. And it oftentimes resonates with them as an alternative for them. And then, of course, you have your standard, rental properties, potentially a farm or some oil and gas royalties, that sort of thing. So all of that, they're not all huge revenue streams, but they're diverse. And when you add it all together, it gives you multiple ways to provide for yourself. And I think that's an important aspect in the 21st century, frankly.
I do too. I'm like, I saw you do a video not too long ago about, it was sort of about how network marketing gets a bad rap. And, it could just be that I'm more aware of it, right? That I'm paying attention. But like, I was thinking about the things that I need in my life right now. And I was like, who do I know that has a business, right, that I could get that from? Because right. Exactly what you're talking about. It's more and more people recognizing, I don't know how much security there is in this in this job that I have, and I want to have something else. And so is that what you found in your skincare business?
I did. I mean, I think it's, again, one way. And I tell you what I love about the whole multi-level marketing direct sales business, which, by the way, I never thought I would be involved in, because
right, you came from like hardcore corporate.
I did. And I think also when I was growing up, Carrie, this was in the days of, Amway and Fuller Brush Men. And it was like there was a stigma associated with that, where people, stockpiled product in their garages and that kind of thing. And the world is not that way anymore. To think that direct sales and multi-level marketing is the same as it was back in the 80s and 90s is just folly. We are truly, I mean, goodness, there are large corporations that are using direct sales and multi-level marketing as an extension to their brick and mortar organizations, because they realize they can't afford a brick and mortar sales organization. They realize that most people do want to have an additional revenue stream. So why not leverage those people that want that? Because we're all smart, by the way. So we know what we're doing. We're business women and men. Right. We know how to do this, right? So the key is to figure out, okay, what kind of culture am I looking for? What kind of product could I be passionate about? Is it going to be a good fit for my other aspects of life? And so, yeah, it's been that for me. It's been surprisingly fun and lucrative.
So what is, right, if your purpose is to be you, and being you means living fully into your potential, what's been your biggest lesson?
Well, so far, because I was going to say I learn lessons every day. My Lord have mercy. I think trusting your gut and defining success on your terms. And I will tell you, I think, again, I don't know whether your listeners will resonate, but when I was growing up in corporate America, we had the ladder of success, so to speak, where, success was deemed as you climbed the ladder. More money, more span of control. The faster you climb, the better. Boy, howdy, she's really successful. And all of that is true up to a point. And then as we evolve as human beings, we have the courage to define success on our own terms. And oh, by the way, that can mean large positions, lots of money, lots of security, and it can also mean none of that. It can mean, I wrote my second book was all about people who did define success on their own terms, and there were hospice nurses. There were hospice chaplains. There were people who, by the way, make zero money in the big scheme of things, but yet their purpose is so divinely orchestrated. Imagine having the privilege to be with somebody on the last few breaths of someone's life. That kind of gives me chills just saying that out loud. Yeah. It has nothing to do with money or what conventional society has labeled success. They defined it on their own terms, which there's just nothing more beautiful than that. And so I think all of us have that responsibility to define success on our own terms. And I think that was a huge lesson that I learned probably, 20 years ago, when I jumped off the high board and decided, I don't know what I'm going to do, but this isn't it. And everybody thought I'd lost my ever-loving mind because I was leaving at the height of at that point, it certainly wasn't as high as I could have gone, but I was definitely on the fast track, no question about it. But it wasn't fulfilling to me anymore.
That moment is so common that I have the life I thought I wanted and I'm totally unfulfilled, right? I think that's the beginning of a lot of people's entrepreneurial journey. That Here I am, successful.
Right.
Why doesn't it feel like what I thought it was going to feel like? So My question to you then is, what is success on your terms? What does that look like to you now?
Oh, well, it's giving. I think the juice that fuels my engine is helping other people and being in service to them. I have a phrase that I've used a lot, and it's just become a mantra for me. I really, truly believe that we are here on this planet to learn from one another, to teach each other, and to serve. And we do so all through this magic elixir called love. And that is success to me. If I feel like I'm truly being in service to somebody else and doing so just with purity of intention, not with some hidden agenda, but just with purity of intention. Like I really, really, really want this person to be all that they can be and to reach whatever goal that they have for themselves. Man, it just doesn't get much better than that. It just doesn't get much better than that. And so to me, that is success, and how it manifests, by the way, is going to be different. It may or may not still be leadership coaching and consulting and skincare and all of that. I mean, in my third or fourth chapter, it might be hospice chat work. I don't know what it's going to be. I mean, I'm going to be open to what the universe wants me to hear. But right now, that's how it's showing up. That may sound a little woo-woo for your listeners, but
no, not for my people.
Good.
Earlier, but I didn't. And they're your age. My people are considerably older than me. So there you go. You're talking to, I think, a lot of women just like you, actually. Yeah. Okay, Kristin, I freaking love everything that you said, but the idea, well, one, I need to tell you who you are is a leader, right? And I learned that about myself too. Like that's where your gifts lie, is they just naturally tend them. I'm not finding the right words. You are an influencer just because you walk your talk. You're not afraid to be who you are. And all of the things that the Kristinisms, I am like laughing so hard about that because I actually have something, it's a document called Carrieisms that like the things that continually come out of my mouth, that so much so that people start repeating them back to me as like, oh, here's a Carrieism. So right. I think that's fantastic. And so you are a leader by nature, right? So every role you find yourself in, leadership's going to be a part of it. Whether or not you're leading a big sales team, you're leading in your network marketing group, you're leading through the writing of your books, right? You're taking people on the journey that they need to go through that way. You're leading in your speaking, you're leading with your actual like leadership development stuff. And you're doing all of it with, you said purity of intention, which is so much more beautiful than what I say. I just say, just show up and be you, right? Like, but doing it from that aligned space, right? From that, I will be me, I will use my gifts, I will have purity of intention, and magic will happen.
Yes. Well, it's interesting, Carrie, when you talk about leadership, and I loved how you drew the distinction that it doesn't have to be leading, it's not necessarily the Pied Piper, right? Jeff Immelt, the CEO of General Electric, had a wonderful quote that I heard him say once: leadership begins with a constituency of one.
Yes.
Right? So we're the CEO of our own lives. And so, golly gee, if we can't lead our lives, then, right? I mean, and if we're not authentic in who we are, who's going to want to follow us? I mean, I've followed some frauds before, and it's a very disheartening experience when you get to wherever it is they think they're taking you, and then you get there and you're like, wow, this is not where I thought we were going.
Like we took a wrong turn.
Yeah, exactly. But you kept following them because, you were young and naive or whatever, right?
And learning, so that's what I found, is learning to trust your God-given gifts. Like, it took me a long time to recognize it's okay. Oftentimes now, when I notice that I'm critical of someone else, I have to ask, why is that, right? Where in my life am I not showing up in the way that I'm criticizing them, right?
Right.
And following the wrong leader, I think as a young person, right, you just sort of think that person must know more, right? That's part of stepping into your gifts, is recognizing like, oh, I could do this, right? I could have got us where we needed to go.
Right.
All right. I am just delighting in this conversation. I think you are amazing. I love your Kristinisms. I love every piece of content that you put out, even just this conversation we had. Like, I am delighting in the wealth of experience and all the metaphors and all the Kristinisms and all the, like, just about every question I asked you, you were like, well, it's based on this, this, and this. You are so articulate, and you just are such a wealth of knowledge. So,
I've got so much to learn, Carrie. Oh my word. You know, when you're older, like I am, you know, this whole experience of learning, you know, how to work with technology in a way that was foreign, you know, it's like I feel like I'm getting, you know, dipped in the grease every day and it's a wonderful experience. I don't mean like it's a crispy critter or dipped in the grease experience, but you are kind of like, oh my gosh, and I'm loving it. And yet you do realize just how much you have to learn. I mean, I have so much to learn, you know?
Well, it's funny when you talked earlier about running your own race. I don't know if you know this about me, but I was a cross country and track coach for a really long time. So,
right.
Well, really long time relatively. So all of my Carrie-isms kind of come from that realm, right? And I tend to go to running analogies. So when you were talking about running your own race, I was thinking about like, well, yeah, you're never going to win if you run somebody else's race. And if you run someone else's race, you're never even going to know what you could have done. It's not even about winning, right? It's about stepping into your potential. And the
Right.
only way you can ever do that is if you run to your own strengths. You can't run based on what somebody else is going to do, right? You just have to run to your own strengths,
Right.
and trust. Anyways, all that to be said is the journey we're on now, right? As you're diving into more of an online presence, right? Is just recognizing like it's a marathon.
Right. Oh, heavens, yes. Yes.
And it's our own race. And the thing that is amazing about you is, and why I've been so endeared to you and why I was like, I need to interview this woman, is you showing up as you, which is raw and real. And there's something about that Southern accent that just makes me want to lean in, right? There's this relatability to you, this willingness to share stories, right? This vulnerability to you. But it's that I believe when you show up as you and you're fully aligned with what you're doing, you cannot fail.
Yeah. I agree with that. Well, I mean, go off on that whole metaphysical about what is failure, right? We could totally go there. We don't want to go there, but we could go there because there really is no such thing.
Amen. Do you know, I write amen on Facebook all the time when people say something amazing, but you have gotten me saying that this entire interview over and over again.
Oh, well.
Preach, sister.
No, thanks. I mean, like I say, I've got so much to learn. I think I'm constantly being humbled, you know, which is a great, great thing because it just forces you to learn and to dig deep and to have that resiliency that, you know, we need to have, right?
And it's also why you're worth following, right? You're constantly being humbled. What I heard in that is that I heard someone say once, great leaders, I'm going to butcher it, but they don't lead from the mountaintop. They lead from like the bottom of the hill. This idea, like you lead from beside and beneath, right? So when you're feeling humbled, that's when you're feeling like, wow, this is something I've got a lot to learn. Like that's the beauty of it. That's what makes you so relatable as someone to follow as a leader, not this perfect person up on the hill. But
I'm far from that. Trust me. And if I'm on a hill, it's a mole hill. So, that's okay. You know, but it's a mole hill.
Oh, I love it. Well, I've just so enjoyed this conversation. I love that I thought it was going to go one way, and that's always happens. It went completely another way.
Yeah. What were you thinking it was going to go?
I just thought I wanted to ask you about like multiple income streams and how that's like working for you. But here's the thing. How we do anything is how we do everything. And so it's only natural that through the course of this conversation, the Kristinisms come out. And that's why I freaking love these conversations, is because I fully believe people don't buy what you do, they buy who you are. And that's my intention behind doing these interviews, is like, I want people to show who they are. And then people watching can decide like, well, I really like that person. What are they about? And, you know, I just know that good comes from fully being who we are. And so of course our conversation was gonna go down to who you are at your core.
Well, that's because you interviewed that way. You asked provocative questions, right? There was no way for me to give a binary answer. Not that I'm a binary girl anyway, to be honest. I'm one of those gray, fuzzy people. I'm not a pointillist painter. I'm an impressionist painter, right? It's fuzzy, fuzzy, fuzzy.
See, you're so good with the metaphors. I'm like loving all of them. Like, yes, impressionist. Yes, I am that too. And I think I resonate with you so much because I see so much of myself in you. Like I see you're just in a different phase of your journey, but I'm so seeing like, oh, I can relate to that. Oh, that's how she used that gift that I also have that way. So
right.
That.
Oh, this has been so fun.
Isn't it? I love him. I love having these conversations. So
I can hardly wait till I get to meet you in person.
I know. You're not the only guest who I'm like, we have to get together because I want to like hug this person in person. So, Kristin Kaufman, thank you so much for being here. You are a delight. The thread that has run.
I'm trying to get Lulu. Do you want to meet Lulu?
Oh, sure.
Lulu, come here. Come here. Let me get her. All right.
That okay? Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Meanwhile, look at this amazing painting.
Oh. Yeah, that painting. Uh-oh. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
That painting's from here. Say hi, Lulu.
Oh, sweet Lulu.
Hi. Oh, I love you
Not
too.
into me.
Do what now?
She's not into me.
Say hi. Say, I know. That's Auntie Carrie. That's Auntie Carrie. Yeah, the painting, that's from Sydney, Australia from, gosh, almost 30 years ago. A wonderful story. It's all about women. And that circle is where they go to get their nourishment spiritually and the paths. Isn't that fascinating? I thought it was very unique. Pansy Epigardi is the artist. I have another one of her paintings upstairs that I got just last year.
It looks like it has so much texture as well.
It does. And I just love the spiritual Aboriginal story behind it and I thought when I was trying to find a good place to sit for this, I thought, oh, that's perfect because it's kind of what we do.
It is. And then that we had the whole conversation around that is amazing.
Isn't that cool? You know, it's like divine providence.
It really is. Thank you for introducing me to Lulu. Thank you for being my guest. I'm excited to share this with my people. And thank you because I believe that just by being ourselves and living our gifts and stepping fully into our potential, we're changing the world. So thank you for being a world changer.
I love that. I hope we are changing the world. Oh, Lulu does too.
Yeah, she's a world changer. All right. Thanks so much, Kristin. And thanks so much for watching.
Carrie. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. See you next time, everyone.
Bye.